Do you want, can we start with how we got there before we get to the ending for Oregon, Ohio State?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Right,
We'll
because
slide right into that.
I feel like there's an entire, I feel like that'll be the easy street, right? Like people who don't know college football are going to be able to talk about Oregon's win over Ohio State, 32-31. Momentous spot for Dan Lanning. Momentous spot for the Ducks. Their first ever win over a top 2 team. No, I wrote on CBSSports.com on Friday, sort of the painting the picture of Oregon in the 21st century throughout their rise. They've kind of been like not lovable loser, but not the main character. Like they've been the foil. They've been on the other side of Cam Newton. They've been on the other side of Cardale Jones and Urban Meyer and this Ohio State team. They've been on the other side of a lot of college football stories. And in beating Ohio State, at least for tonight, Oregon is your main character. They've got the inroad to the Big Ten championship game. So before we get to, the end sequence, the clock management by Ryan Day, Will Howard's decision to slide, all those things in the matchup itself, Tom, what really stood out to you?
The offenses were better than the defenses, which was basically the opposite of how I thought this game was going to go, first and foremost.
Indeed.
We talked all year about like Ohio State not showing anything. Who knew that like Oregon's plan all year was to not let Evan Stewart do a damn thing, and that way he could just torch Denzel Burke all night when Ohio State finally came to town. Because you came into this game, Evan Stewart, I think he had like 18 catches. He was averaging 11 yards per reception. Tonight he had 7 catches for 149, averaging 21 yards per reception. I think the passing game for Oregon looked a lot better than I could have anticipated. Dylan Gabriel, especially because he goes to his left a lot. He very rarely goes to his right. He was throwing deep balls to his right very well. I mean, sometimes the receivers were just open, but he looked better as a passer tonight, I think, than he has at any point. We also saw him scramble for the touchdown, which is something he just hasn't done this year. He has not been, and there were a couple times tonight, Todd Blackledge was talking about it during the game, where he was clearly hesitant to run, and he's been that way all season long until that one touchdown run where JT Tuiamolo just completely, went after the running back and just lost contained, and he just went around the edge there for an easy score. But it was nice to see him doing that, because I think part of what makes Dylan Gabriel effective is his ability, even if he's not like a sprinter or a terrific runner, his ability to give you something with his legs is valuable, and he hadn't really been giving it to Oregon this year. So to see him doing that tonight was, I think good. If they're going to save it for big spots, fine. But tonight was a big spot, clearly. And then defensively, I mean, neither one of these teams could get off the field for the most part. Like the drives that ended without points were typically drives that ended with missed field goals or turnovers. You weren't seeing a whole lot of, getting off the field and forcing punts. It was the offenses won this evening. And I think, I was talking about this with you, Chip. We were texting. I think going forward, just based on what I've seen recently, my modus operandi when it comes to games between like elite teams, like top 3, top 4 teams, I'm just betting the over, because you can't get there without an elite offense. And we're seeing time and time again that the elite offenses are beating every defense every single time. So we saw it with Alabama, Georgia. We saw it tonight with Ohio State, Oregon. I feel like over principle is coming this way. Next week, I think, what is it, Texas and Georgia? Over. Lock it up. Touchdown LSU. Anyways.
Wow. What a freaking game.
What a day.
Wow. Who was that, Anderson?
Yeah, that was Anderson.
The guy who dropped the ball earlier?
Yep.
Do you go over 2 here?
Yes.
Who has better kicker?
Because then the 3.5 covers.
Doing the win.
That's right. Yeah, that is true. We talked about, if you guys don't watch us on CBS Sports Network, obviously CBS has some Big Ten rights, so we're able to really wax a lot on this game on our Tuesday show. And we said, hey, like, will Ohio State try to play Oregon like other teams have played Oregon, which is to deny the explosives and just sort of take your medicine, allow the underneath stuff, and win with your beef in the red zone? They did not. In fact, Ohio State allowed passes of 28, 69, 32, 48, 32, and 26. It didn't work. Oregon has real speed with Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart. Oregon is not a great running team. They have not been a good red zone team. Ohio State got a couple red zone stops when they actually got them down there, but the explosive plays for Oregon, to me, were sort of the difference in this ball game. I mean, those, again, 28, 69, 32, 48, 32, 26, just through the air. And they had a couple of explosive rushes. I don't think that I loved Ohio State's defensive game plan. And I'm not saying like I'm smarter than Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles is a hell of a defensive football coach.
But you said in big games, there's this tendency to like try to like crank it up a little bit. And how much do you trust that secondary? Because I know a lot of the conversation before we got going in the tailgate was about a big criticism coming out of this game is going to be for Ohio State secondary. That me and anybody else who was talking about Ohio State's defense is one of the best in the country. The fact is they had not had to play a set of speed and skill when it comes to the passing attack like they did today. Did they get exposed or did they get schemed into a bad position? I guess would be my question as you're, going down this thread.
I think the answer is probably some of both.
Okay.
Right. Keep in mind also that Oregon lost Trayshawn Holden for a spitting ejection, which I don't know if you guys saw the replay. I don't know if it really, was or was not.
Oh, it was.
It was.
Yeah, I couldn't see it on. I had all the multi screens going, and I was like, okay, yeah. So he did spit on. Right.
I will say,
as our friend Robbie Callen tweeted, "Don't spit on a guy wearing a visor because it's hard to not see the evidence."
That's.
I mean, it was like it was the dumbest in a day filled with dumb decisions, dumb plays. The fact that Trayshawn Holden is Gary Bryant Jr. is already out of the game. Like he's not playing because
Holden's been their deep guy for a lot of the year. Like
Holden, I was going to say I would not argue him as a top 2 receiver, but he might be the third most important receiver, or maybe fourth behind Terrence Ferguson if we say pass catcher.
He's definitely like the alert clear out guy.
I think the Ohio State corners did get exposed a little bit though, right? Like it's not like Ohio State was blitzing like crazy. They did not get an insane amount of pressure on Gabriel. Just Oregon's receivers consistently won on the outside against the Ohio State corners. Like that was really awesome. I thought Gabriel saved his best game of the entire year, and like one of the best games of his career considering the opponent, right? For this one and the Oregon.
Red River last year on a day that had Red River. The fact that I was remembering those clutch throws, that he had in that game right there. But I will definitely hear. This is the best, unquestionably the best game of his Oregon career for sure.
That was really impressive. I mean, I think you have to be like Oregon, hell of a job, right? Like the ability to execute there, the ability to hit the explosive plays, the ability to overcome some of the red zone screw ups they had with the missed field goals and the turnover on downs. Like that's big time. They were able to figure it out, and it is hard at times. We talked about this a lot of the offseason and a lot during the season. They really hadn't played anybody who could they really challenge them. So in some ways, you're kind of guessing to see, what would happen. But I was really impressed. Like that was good, and that's why you go get an Evan Stewart. Okay, because you know what? What do they have? 149 yards.
Yep,
huge game. They had to have it, and they got it, and that was. I think there's a pretty good chance we have a rematch there, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and like the red zone issue too. It's one of those things with Gabriel where, like I mentioned earlier, he was able to run for the touchdown earlier, although that was 27, so they weren't in the red zone yet. But you could tell by their play calling once they get in there, they're not nearly as comfortable having Dylan throw in those tight areas. Like they were running the ball, very frequently in those spots. And I think that hurt them against Ohio State today because they were just kind of loading the box and it caused them to struggle. So they had to settle for field goals. And it's just, they got away with it tonight. But if there is a rematch, that's one of those things I think they need to address. And I think the best way to do that is to use Dylan Gabriel as a runner, kind of the same way Ohio State used Will Howard on his touchdown.
So go ahead.
I do think we saw 2 pretty damn good football teams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of today. There was a lot of ball today, and we're going to get to it. It's like, yeah, that was a win, but it was like a really concerning win.
Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. Just go run down the list.
I didn't get any eyes on Georgia, so I'm going to have to go back and watch that one.
I mean, even Penn State escapes, but you're also kind of like, oh man.
If Ohio State gets that field goal at the end and wins, I still don't think I'm dropping the loser out of the top 4 on my ballot.
Yes. I got
right.
And a reminder coming up in a little bit. Once Ole Miss and LSU goes final, whenever that is, we'll start talking about the top 25 implications. How do you think Oregon's offensive line fared in this matchup? Because Yeah, I thought I was just about to say that, because the one thing that has been the buzzword, the talking point, the place where you start to pick Oregon apart when you're trying to find flaws, when you're trying to, find reasons to dock them a little bit. We'd mentioned they had not allowed a sack in the last 2 weeks. We'd mentioned that they'd been
3
shuffling
weeks
around.
now.
3 weeks now. Yeah, great call. We'd been mentioning the way they'd been coming along. The test that Oregon had going up against this defensive front for Ohio State was massive. And to my eye, as untrained as it may be, it looked like they passed that test. And that's got to be something that's really, really encouraging for Will Stein, for Dylan Gabriel, for like everybody, when you're trying to think about how are we going to not just like keep gaming this out, but like, how are we going to go compete for a national championship? How are we going to be able to avoid a bad loss? I thought that group did a good job today.
I thought they did a great job, because it's not only did they not give up the sack, they only gave up 2 tackles for a loss. They averaged 5 yards on the ground. James Jordan, like, I've seen it in recent weeks where James Jordan was getting hit at the line of scrimmage and breaking tackles and then getting yards. That wasn't happening tonight. He was getting room to run. And overall, I thought their offensive line played better than Ohio State's. Ohio State's was banged up. They lost their left tackle during the game. They had some subs on there, but I just think that was the one key spot, because even without Jordan Birch, I still thought Oregon's defensive line played very well against Ohio State. They didn't excel. They didn't have an incredible game, but if I was grading both teams, I would give Oregon's defensive line the slight edge tonight, even without Birch.
Is there a chance Ohio State's defensive line is not as good as we think? Like, the chat's saying, hey, like, after this game, given what we know about Oregon's offensive line, given what we know, like, who is missing for Oregon's offensive line, like some of the guys they were counting on in the preseason who probably won't be back anytime soon, given that they held up, maybe some of these guys who turned down the NFL for Ohio State, maybe the round that they turned down was not quite as good as reported, because, like, I did not see enough, like, dominating plays from Ohio State's defensive line in this game. I think the chat is onto something here. But yet I also have access to the grades that the NFL teams pay for from the 2 major services.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, like, these guys got pretty good grades. So I tend to think those are probably real.
I feel like
I don't know what to believe here, but like, my eyes tell me they didn't dominate.
No, they didn't. But that's the thing, though. Like, we do this a lot with defenses, where elite defenses are the best in the country, but they always have bad nights, because at some point you're going to go up against an offense that figures you out.
That's a great,
So it's like, I mean, Georgia's defense got picked apart by Alabama for 30 minutes a couple weeks ago. I don't suddenly think that defense sucks. I think that you just see it when you face good offenses. Good offense is going to beat good defense most of the time. So I still think they're very good. I think that you can argue they did not play as well tonight, and that both would be true.
I think that's fair. You got to give a ton of credit to Oregon, man. Like this.
I was going to say the players,
the best they have looked against the best team that they've played, and probably the best team they'll play all year.
That's Dan Lanning's whatever signature win. But I mean, like you were talking about earlier, Chip, that's just a huge win for that program that they've kind of been missing. So what were they, 0-19-1 all time against top 2 teams?
0 wins against top 2 teams, 0-19-1 all time.
So like, if you're Oregon,
better update.
Like, we think back to last year, the Washington games. We all picked Oregon every single time that they played, and Washington beat them. And you just think, if you're a Ducks fan going back all these years, you've been in these big spots against these teams, you've come up short. Tonight you came through. Tonight you won. So tonight you're looking at a situation where you look at the rest of their schedule. Like, there's a very good chance you're going to see Ohio State again. But more than anything, there's a very good chance you're getting to the Big Ten championship. Ohio State's got a harder path now because they can't afford to really lose anymore, whereas Oregon's got the toughest game on its schedule out of the way, and it's still undefeated.
Did Travis Hunter come back in, by the way?
I haven't. I'm just locked in.
I'm trying to do show prep. Like, I got all my notes here.
That
I'm locked in on your beautiful faces, cover 3 tailgate, and then I've got LSU Ole Miss, and that's all I've got attention for. Like, I've often said, if you're watching more than 4 college football games at once, you are not watching college football. And I understand you can put an impressive shot, like an impressive picture of your setup. But if you were trying to like actually consume and comprehend what is going on right now, anything more than that to me, and maybe I've just got a small brain, but like anything more than that is you're not actually taking in anything. You're not actually watching the football game.
Come on,
One
Chip. I
thing
think
Danny
your brain
said-
is a perfectly normal size.
Thanks.
One thing Danny said on the show like 2 years ago that I thought really rang true tonight. It's just kind of always stuck in my head. He's like, Gabriel doesn't have a good arm, but he does throw a really nice like run under it rainbow ball, like a really nice catchable. I thought. I mean, obviously, like, look, Danny played quarterback in the NFL for what, 10 years, 12 years, however, like a long ass time. So that's always kind of stuck with me. And a couple of those balls tonight, they weren't lasers. They're just really like laid out there nice. They let the speed run under it. That was pretty. And that's what you needed him to do.
Yeah, it's the tight window stuff where you really kind of notice the difference. But deep balls, he's got a very pretty deep ball, especially to the left usually. That's why I was surprised tonight because they were throwing deep to the right so well.
Okay, do we need to talk about like the final sequence? Why did Ohio State think the clock was going to stop?
So
what is the rule? Should the clock have stopped?
No, the clock should. My understanding of the rule is that because he was inbounds and the initial signal after he goes down is to keep the clock going, so that then after the penalty, as soon as the ball is spotted, the clock starts to go. And so it should have been on it should have been on the sideline and Will Howard, right? It should have been on either Will Howard with all of his years of experience to understand what's going on, which is tough in Autzen Stadium, given the stakes, given the situation. And so if not Will Howard, it should have been on the sideline to help Will Howard understand what that situation is, because I think I had it roughly in the moment as like, 12 seconds gone? Like,
yeah, I think roughly, yeah.
I mean, that plus the slide is pretty rough right there.
The other one, like dropping the snap on a drive where they were moving the ball well on what I thought was an okay snap. Right? That killed it, right? Like that was Ohio State comes out, impressive drive. They retake the lead.
Didn't he get turf monstered too? Or he kind of lost his footing?
On the one sack where he was just kind of, he was jittery.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Like,
man,
he was jittery in the final minutes of that game. In that environment, it was getting to him. And I don't really think that, you could sometimes speculate that that's the case. I feel like the results tonight, the mistakes he made, just falling down, missing the snap, I think that suggests pretty strongly what was going on. I think he was not in a great spot.
Jimmy Horn's out of this game too for Colorado.
Buffs are dying at an alarming
Sorry,
rate.
I'm just looking at the second half, trying to think like should I lay this 2.5 here live? Last one of the night, right? Or well, I guess we'll have the Boise, but
congratulations to everybody who took Ashton Genty to score a touchdown minus 6,600. You got your money.
54-yarder. That's amazing. Talk the 12 men dead play. I don't know.
Did they do it on
purpose?
Is
it smart to run 12 men out there on purpose so that like if you get a stop, and if not, like the worst that happens is you get the penalty and you eat the clock? I think it's genius. It's kind of like, should you hard count like crazy on your own goal line? Yes, because like I'd rather get the 5-yard if you get them to jump off sides rather than like lose the quarter yard, potentially there. So do they do it on purpose?
Did Oregon do it on purpose? It's so funny.
I don't think so. But it's sneaky genius if they did.
Do you know where my mind went? My mind was
big time at Ole Miss.
My mind was like laughing, thinking about how Ryan Day sees 10 men on the field, doesn't say anything to the official. Ryan Day sees 12 men on the field, starts screaming in the official's ear.
That's a good point.
I was trying to. My gosh, dude.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the Oregon ingenuity that might have been afoot in terms of send 12 men out there and what it could mean on that part.
I mean, I think the fact that we're speaking about this game for like 15 minutes, it talks about like how damn good of a game it was. It was
so good.
Congrats to NBC. That hell of a ball game right there you guys got. Well, we had a pretty good one today too.
We had a fantastic one, which sounds good to say. Coming up on the other side,